All right, Leva here. And we are on the last video of 8.2. This is part 3. We are talking about unitary and federal states and this concept of gerrymandering. So again, we are on unitary and federal states. These are the types of governments in a country, like the type of government structure. And basically, the difference between unitary and federal state is, are you going to have, the uni means one. So you're going to have one strong central government that makes all of your decisions and makes all the laws for the entire country, or are you going to have a system where you have shared power between a central government and the provinces/regional governments? And for unitary systems, again, these tend to work in small countries, monarchies, oligarchies, dictatorships, or those countries that are trying to be nation states. Because especially, obviously, dictatorship, oligarchy, even some monarchies like in Saudi Arabia and in Jordan, this makes sense that they have these monarchies and these dictatorships, that they have a strong central government because they're the one group making all the decisions. You'd have this in a small country too, like a small micro country, like maybe Liechtenstein or Luxembourg. A federal system, you see this typically in countries that are very diverse, like multi-ethnic countries or multinational countries. Obviously not Russia, not China for the most part, but the true sense of the term multinational, you would see mostly a federal system, multi-ethnic states, and also countries that are very large in territory and in population. The federal state, again, you have this shared power like we do in the United States. We have our strong central government, which is in Washington, D.C. This is our national government. And then we have our individual local units. And even those local units, even when in Winter Park's its own city government. Then we have the government of Orange County here in Florida, then the government of Florida. And all of those three, that city, county, internal unit, they all share power with the strong federal central government. And you tend to see these federal systems in countries that have these very strong devolutionary pressures. And because of the demands by many ethnicities or minority groups for more self-determinism and representation, more self-rule, more independence, what you tend to see is a shift to a even more shared power, more federal system, like in Switzerland and in India, where they want to keep the country together, they want to keep it intact. So one way to do that is to appease all these different ethnic and minority groups, and so they give them more of their own autonomy, their own governing power. This was especially true in like the UK. The UK has given a lot more governing power to England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It is really because Scotland demanded so much more. Same thing in Canada. You see a lot more of that control goes to the provinces, especially like Quebec and Ontario. So the countries have restructured their governments to transfer some authority, some decision-making and law-making powers from that national government to the local government units. So you see the shift to a more federal system. So this shift from the unitary to the federal. And again, anytime you see this internal division like this, and you can see that these are independent internal units, that's always going to indicate that this is a federal system. Next, we have, again, if you look, Mexico's a federal system. How do I know? Well, look at this internal division here of all of these internal units. That's shared power between their strong central government in Mexico City with their local internal units. You can see Norway, Sweden, Finland. These are more unitary systems that are not so divided up. So unitary systems are especially common in Europe. Again, that's that history of the nation-state concept after World War II. That's where the nation-state concept really originated, was after World War II. Just giving these ethnic groups, the nations in Europe, said, okay, fine, Germans, be your own country. French, be your own countries. Italian, be your own countries. uh, Irish, be your own country. Norwegians, be your own country, hoping that if they just governed themselves, they would be less to fight about. In a federal system, such as the United States, local governments possess more authority to adopt their own laws. Again, this would be like we have a city government, a county government, and then like the government of Florida. Each of our internal units, all 50, have a lot of lawmaking capabilities and decision-making capabilities. Multi-ethnic and multinational states may adopt a federal system of government to empower different ethnicities and their nationalities, especially if they live in separate regions of the country, to try to, again, quell that centrifugal force and that call for that devolutionary force, that call for more autonomy. Remember, devolution is the demand for more autonomy by a region or a group within a country against the central government, the national government. The federal system is also more suitable for very large countries because the national capital may be too remote to provide effective control over isolated regions. I mean, think about if you had to take a tree down in your yard and you had to wait for the national government in Washington, D.C. to approve that. How long and tedious and time-consuming and expensive it would be to make those small local decisions, like about everything from our streets department to our sewage to water to our permitting for building a new house. What if you had to wait for the national government to make all that law, all those rules? That's how it is in a unitary system. Next, let's talk about Poland. They have a new federal government. You can see that they shifted after their communist rule. They shifted into from a very strong unitary dictatorship to now a more federal state. I know this because I can see the internal divisions here. And so they've shifted a lot of their power from their federal government, which again was communist, to a more federal system. And in these municipalities, the local units, the national government turned over ownership of housing. So now the local level, they make decisions about housing, water supplies, transportation systems, and other publicly owned structures. Next, let's talk about electoral geography. So let's talk about how we get this internal, the boundaries and the districts within states in the United States. The boundaries separating legislative districts within the United States and other countries are redrawn periodically to ensure that each district has approximately the same population. So as population shifts, they want to make sure that the boundaries, the size and such shifts as well. The boundaries must be redrawn because migration inevitably results in some districts gaining population, whereas others are losing. The job of redrawing these boundaries in most European countries is entrusted to an independent commission. In the United States, the independent states, like the state of Florida, the state of Georgia, the state of Indiana, the state of Alaska, each state, the job of redrawing those boundaries is entrusted to the state legislature, and they do it every 10 years. They take the census data from the United States Census Bureau, and that's how they know how population is shifting, and then they redraw that every 10 years. The process of redrawing, redistricting they call this, legislative boundaries for the purpose of benefiting the party in power is called gerrymandering. Again, so redrawing the boundaries is called redistricting. That just means that they are trying to balance out population from the different districts within a state, because remember, each district gets a member of the House of Representatives. So in Florida, we tend to fluctuate between 27 and 29. That's how many districts we have based on our population. And that gives us a number of representatives in the House of Representatives. And so because the state legislature in each state gets to do the redrawing, sometimes you see where they redraw the boundaries in order to benefit their political party, or what we call stacking the deck. That's called gerrymandering. Again, they redraw to benefit their political party. Anytime you see political boundaries that look like this, let's go back to this one. Anytime you see these political boundaries, you see this really crazy looking one here. Anytime you see where they're really oddly shaped, just like this one's very oddly shaped, that's as a result of gerrymandering. You can see how these are all very oddly shaped. That's so that they're including or excluding different groups so that they can make sure that they get their vote. So gerrymandering takes three forms. One is called a wasted vote. This spreads opposition supporters across many districts, but keeps them in a minority. So let's say that you're in a Republican-controlled state, like the state of Florida. And the legislature, they can draw the different districts, and let's say they want to divide up the Democrats within, they divide them up into three separate three separate districts where they are minorities in the minority in each of those three districts, thus ensuring that the Republicans will win that district. That's called a wasted vote. Excess vote, this concentrates opposition supporters into a few districts, and that way they're willing to concede that they'll have a couple of districts where they are the majority. Then the stack vote, that means this links distant areas of like-minded voters through oddly shaped boundaries. Again, that's how you get these very strange, odd-looking districts where they're connecting. This would be like let's say it's a Democratic, where the Democratic Party rules that state. They're in control of that state. Well, then they may connect all of their different voters into one district by connecting through this type of oddly shaped boundary. So again, anytime you see this congressional district and then there's an odd shape like this is always the result of this gerrymandering. Again, it's a way of stacking the vote. It's a way of creating congressional districts where it favors the political party in power. And this has got some different implications. One, remember the congressional districts. This is how you get representatives in the United States Congress, the House of Representatives in the Congress. But also this has to do so much and is a very powerful part of getting the electoral votes for particular states. So the state legislative races at the local level are actually very, very important whenever you look at time for voting and time for campaigns. All right, this concludes our, oh no, wait, sorry, no, there's some more here about Florida and Georgia, the gerrymandering here. Recent gerrymandering in the United States has been primarily stack vote. This is in both Georgia and Florida. It's been especially attractive to create districts inclined to elect ethnic minorities. So there is a benefit, there is a good side, a silver lining to this concept of gerrymandering. So it is a way of ensuring that there is more equal representation of different minority and ethnic groups in the United States. So by combining different majority ethnicities or minorities into one district, then that ensures that there's going to be better representation. So through gerrymandering, only about 1/10 of the congressional seats are competitive, making a shift of more than a few seats increasingly improbable from one election to another in the United States. This is why you don't see a whole lot of significant change in our congressional rule in the United States. Okay, so this does in fact conclude our presentation of 8.2, why do boundaries cause problems in countries. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.